The Alpha King's voice echoed through the grand hall like thunder, each word a blade cutting through her soul. "She is just a human," he declared, his golden eyes cold as winter frost, dismissing 20 years of her life with 4 venomous words. The ancient bloodstone crown upon his head gleamed under candlelight as he turned his back on her, his massive frame blocking out the world she thought she knew. But beneath her skin, something ancient stirred, a power that had slumbered in her bloodline for centuries, waiting for this precise moment of humiliation to awaken. When his royal mark began burning on her wrist like liquid silver, revealing the truth neither of them could deny, the entire supernatural world would tremble. She was no mere human. She was his fated Omega Queen, and her vengeance would be legendary. The Silver Crest Kingdom existed in the space between worlds, a realm where moonlight never truly faded, and ancient magic thrummed through every stone, every breath of wind that whispered through the towering pines. Here, werewolf packs had ruled for millennia, their hierarchy as rigid as the mountain peaks that surrounded the capital city of Lunaris. Elara Thorne had lived her entire life in the servants' wing of the royal palace, a sprawling fortress of black granite and silver veins that seemed to grow from the mountain itself. At 20, she possessed a quiet beauty that often went unnoticed, soft brown hair that caught copper in candlelight, grey eyes that held depths of unspoken dreams, and a grace that came from years of making herself invisible. She was human, or so everyone believed. The morning air carried the scent of night-blooming jasmine and something else, something wild and electric that made her skin prickle with awareness. Today was the lunar alignment, the ceremony where Alpha King Cassian Nightshade would choose his queen from among the noble she-wolves of the realm. The entire palace buzzed with anticipation, servants rushing through corridors with silks and flowers. While the aristocratic wolves preened and postured, Elara moved through the chaos like a ghost, her arms laden with fresh linens for the guest chambers. She'd learned long ago to keep her head down, to be useful but unremarkable. Her mother had been a palace healer before dying of fever when Elara was 12, leaving her daughter with nothing but a strange silver pendant and whispered warnings about hiding her true nature. Elara, the sharp voice of Mistress Verna, the head housekeeper, cut through her thoughts. The king's chambers need attending immediately. Her heart stuttered. In 8 years of service, she'd never been sent to the king's private quarters. Those rooms were reserved for the highest-ranking servants, wolves who understood the delicate politics of power. But mistress, I'm not... Now, girl, Lady Seraphina specifically requested someone inconspicuous. Lady Seraphina Blackthorn. The name alone sent ice through Elara's veins. The king's cousin and closest advisor, she was a she-wolf of impeccable breeding and ruthless ambition, beautiful as a blade and twice as sharp, with midnight hair and violet eyes that missed nothing. Elara climbed the spiral staircase to the king's tower, each step taking her higher into the realm of wolves who could crush her with a thought. The corridors here were different, wider, grander, with tapestries depicting ancient battles and bloodlines stretching back to the first wolves. Torches burned with blue-white flames, magical fire that never consumed its fuel. The king's chambers occupied the entire top floor. As she approached the massive oak doors carved with running wolves, her pendant grew warm against her skin. She'd worn it hidden beneath her dress for so long she barely noticed it anymore, but now it pulsed with heat that made her breath catch. The doors swung open before she could knock. Alpha King Cassian Nightshade stood before her, and the world tilted. He was massive, 6.5 feet of pure predatory power, with shoulders that blocked out the light from the windows behind him. His hair was black as a raven's wing, falling to his collar in waves that suggested wildness barely contained. But it was his eyes that stole her breath, molten gold, ancient and knowing, the eyes of a wolf who'd lived 3 centuries and ruled absolutely for the last 50 years. He wore only black leather pants, his torso bare and covered in the intricate silver markings of his bloodline, runes that moved and shifted across his skin like living things. Scars crossed his chest and arms, each one a story of battles won and enemies destroyed. "You're the human." His voice was deep, resonant, carrying the weight of absolute authority. Not a question, a statement of fact, tinged with something that might have been curiosity or contempt. "Yes, Your Majesty." Elara dropped into a curtsy, keeping her eyes lowered. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to flee from the overwhelming presence of the apex predator before her. "Look at me." It wasn't a request. Slowly she raised her eyes to meet his, and the impact was physical, a jolt of electricity that raced down her spine and pooled low in her belly. For a moment, something flickered in those golden depths. Surprise, recognition, then it was gone, replaced by cool indifference. Lady Seraphina wants the chambers prepared for tonight's celebration. The pause was deliberate, weighted with meaning she didn't understand. You'll find everything you need in the dressing room. Don't touch anything magical. He moved past her, and she caught his scent, pine and smoke and something wild that made her head spin. Then he was gone, his footsteps fading down the corridor, leaving her alone in rooms that smelled of power and danger. Elara worked quickly, changing linens and arranging flowers, trying to ignore the way her pendant continued to burn against her skin. The king's chambers were surprisingly austere for royalty. No gold or jewels, just dark wood and stone, weapons mounted on walls, and books everywhere. Ancient texts in languages she couldn't read, maps of territories she'd never seen. On his desk, she found a leather-bound journal, open to a page covered in bold handwriting. She shouldn't look. She knew better. But her eyes caught on a single line. The prophecy speaks of an omega hidden among humans, bearing the mark of the first Luna. When the king's blood recognizes hers, the old magic will awaken, and the realm will either rise to glory or fall to chaos. Her pendant flared with sudden heat, so intense she gasped. The silver chain snapped, and the pendant fell, clattering onto the journal. Where it touched the page, the ink began to glow with ethereal blue light. "What have you done?" Lady Seraphina stood in the doorway, her violet eyes blazing with fury and something else, fear. She moved with inhuman speed, snatching the pendant before Elara could react. "Where did you get this?" Seraphina's voice was deadly soft, her claws extending as her wolf rose close to the surface. "My mother. It was my mother's." "Your mother." Seraphina laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Tell me, little human, what was your mother's name before she became a palace healer?" I don't know. She never spoke of her past." "Of course she didn't." Seraphina's smile was cruel. "Because Liana Silvermoon was no healer. She was the last daughter of the Omega bloodline, the line everyone believed extinct. And you." She grabbed Elara's wrist, her grip bruising. "You're an abomination, a dormant Omega, living among us, hidden in plain sight." Terror flooded through Elara. Omegas were legend, the rarest and most powerful of wolves, capable of bearing alpha heirs with abilities that could reshape the supernatural world. But they'd been hunted to extinction 2 centuries ago, their power too dangerous, too coveted. "I'm human," Elara whispered. "I can't shift. I have no wolf. Yet." Seraphina released her wrist, but her eyes remained predatory. "Your wolf sleeps, waiting for the right trigger. And tonight, when Cassian chooses me as his queen and marks me before the realm, your pathetic secret will remain buried. You'll continue your meaningless existence, and I'll rule at his side." She pocketed the pendant, her smile sharp as broken glass. "Speak of this to anyone, and I'll ensure you suffer before you die, slowly, creatively. Do you understand?" Elara nodded, her throat too tight for words. "Good. Now finish your work and disappear. Tonight belongs to wolves, not weak human girls with delusions of importance." Seraphina swept from the room, leaving Elara trembling among the silk and flowers, her mother's pendant gone, and a truth she didn't understand burning in her chest like swallowed fire. As sunset painted the sky crimson, Elara stood at her small window in the servants' quarters, watching the nobles arrive for the ceremony. Wolves in their finest, their power radiating like heat waves, all gathered to witness their king claim his queen. She touched her wrist where Seraphina had grabbed her. The skin there tingled strangely, and in the fading light she could swear she saw the faintest shimmer of silver beneath her skin, like a mark trying to surface, a destiny trying to wake. Tonight the Alpha King would choose his queen. Tonight, Elara's carefully constructed world of invisibility would shatter, and the ancient magic sleeping in her blood would begin its inexorable awakening, whether she was ready or not. The Grand Hall of Silvercrest Palace was a cathedral of supernatural power. Vaulted ceilings soared 50 feet high, supported by columns carved from single pieces of moonstone that glowed with inner light. Centuries of magic had seeped into every surface, making the air thick and electric. Tonight, over 300 wolves filled the space. Alphas from every major pack, betas of noble houses, and the elite she-wolves who'd come to witness one of their own ascend to the throne. Elara shouldn't have been there. Servants were meant to remain invisible during royal ceremonies, working behind scenes to ensure everything flowed seamlessly. But Mistress Verna had assigned her to serve wine during the celebration, a task that required moving among the guests like a shadow. She wore the standard servant's uniform, a simple grey dress that marked her as human and beneath notice. Her hair was pulled back severely, her face pale without the cosmetics the noble she-wolves wore. She was a ghost among gods, and that was exactly how she preferred it, except her wrist wouldn't stop burning. Since Serafina had grabbed her that afternoon, the skin there had felt feverish, hypersensitive. Now as she moved through the crowd with her tray of crystal goblets filled with blood wine, a supernatural vintage that would intoxicate wolves but poison humans, the sensation intensified with each passing moment. The ceremony began with the ancient rituals. Elder Thaddeus, the pack's spiritual leader, stood before the massive throne carved from black oak and inlaid with silver. His white beard reached his chest, and his eyes held the milky quality of one who'd seen too many centuries. "We gather under the full moon's blessing." His voice resonated with power that made the very stones hum. "To witness our king choose his queen, his mate, his equal in all things. The bond between Alpha and Omega is sacred, written in starlight and sealed in blood. Tonight King Cassian Nightshade will claim his destiny." Trumpets sounded, their notes pure and haunting. The crowd parted like water. Alpha King Cassian entered, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop and rise simultaneously. He wore ceremonial armor, black leather and silver plate that emphasized his massive frame, with his family crest emblazoned across the chest, a wolf howling at a crescent moon. His hair was pulled back, revealing the sharp planes of his face, the strong jaw, the eyes that glowed molten gold in the magical light. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, each step deliberate, commanding. Every wolf in the room felt the weight of his dominance, the crushing force of an alpha who'd never been challenged and never lost. Elara pressed herself against a column, trying to become invisible, but her eyes betrayed her, drawn to him like a moth to flame. And for one heart-stopping moment, his gaze swept across the crowd and landed on her. Their eyes locked. The world stopped. Her wrist exploded with heat so intense she nearly dropped her tray. Beneath her skin, something silver flashed, visible for just a second before vanishing. Cassian's eyes widened fractionally, his nostrils flaring as if catching a scent that shouldn't exist. Then, Lady Serafina appeared at his side, resplendent in a gown of midnight blue that hugged her curves like water. Diamonds glittered at her throat and wrists, and her midnight hair fell in artful waves down her back. She was every inch a queen, beautiful and powerful, and perfectly bred for this moment. She placed her hand on Cassian's arm possessively, and the spell broke. He turned away from Elara, his expression hardening into the mask of royal indifference. "My king," Serafina's voice carried through the hall, smooth as silk and sharp as steel. "Shall we begin?" The ceremony proceeded with formal precision. Elder Thaddeus called forth the eligible she-wolves, 12 of them, each from bloodlines stretching back to the first wolves. They stood in a semicircle before the throne, beautiful and powerful, their wolves shimmering just beneath their skin. Cassian walked the line slowly, assessing each one. This was politics as much as destiny. His choice would forge alliances, shift power dynamics, determine the future of the realm. The she-wolves preened under his attention, displaying their strength, their beauty, their worthiness. But something was wrong. Elara could feel it in the air, a tension that made her skin prickle. Cassian's jaw was tight, his movements stiff. When he reached Serafina at the end of the line, she smiled triumphantly, already reaching for him. "I have made my choice," Cassian's voice rang out, and the hall fell silent. "Lady Serafina Blackthorn will be my queen." The crowd erupted in applause. Serafina's smile was radiant, victorious. She stepped forward, tilting her head to expose her neck for the marking, the bite that would bond them forever, that would make her queen in truth. Cassian raised his hand, his claws extending. The marking ceremony was sacred, irreversible. Once his fangs pierced her skin and his venom mixed with her blood, they would be bound until death. But he hesitated. His head turned, slowly, inexorably, until his golden eyes found Elara again across the crowded hall. The air between them crackled with energy that made the magical torches flicker. His nostrils flared, and his expression shifted into something between confusion and fury. "No." The word was barely a whisper, but in the sudden silence it echoed like thunder. Seraphina's smile faltered. "My king, I smell—" Cassian's voice was rough, his wolf rising to the surface. "There's an Omega in this hall." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Impossible. Omegas were extinct. Everyone knew this. Elder Thaddeus stepped forward, his ancient eyes sharp. "Your Majesty, there hasn't been an Omega in 200 years. Perhaps the blood wine—" "I know what I smell." Cassian's roar shook the rafters. His eyes were pure gold now, his wolf in full control. "An unmated Omega, here, now." His gaze locked on Elara with laser focus. He moved toward her with terrifying speed, the crowd scattering before him. She backed against the column, her tray clattering to the floor, crystal shattering and blood wine spreading like spilled rubies. "You!" He stopped inches from her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "What are you?" I'm just a servant, Your Majesty. Just a human." "Liar!" His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist, the same wrist that had been burning all evening. The moment his skin touched hers, light exploded between them. Silver fire erupted from the point of contact, racing up both their arms in intricate patterns that looked like ancient runes. Elara screamed, as power she'd never known existed tore through her body, awakening something that had slumbered for 20 years. Her back arched, her eyes rolling back as her dormant wolf surged to the surface with violent force. Cassian staggered back, staring at his arm where a mark had appeared, the sacred symbol of a true mate bond, something that couldn't be faked or forced. The crowd pressed closer, murmuring in shock and disbelief. "The king's mark," someone whispered. "She bears the king's mark." "Impossible," another voice hissed. "She's human." Seraphina pushed through the crowd, her face twisted with rage. "This is a trick, some kind of dark magic. She's nothing but a servant, a human girl with delusions. She's my mate." Cassian's voice was hollow, shocked. He stared at Elara as if she were a ghost, something that shouldn't exist. "My true mate. An Omega." The words should have been a declaration of joy, of destiny fulfilled. Instead, they dripped with horror and disgust. Elara collapsed to her knees, her body convulsing as her wolf tried to emerge for the first time. Pain like she'd never known ripped through her muscles and bones. She could feel it, a presence in her mind, ancient and powerful, howling to be free. But Cassian's next words shattered her more completely than any physical pain ever could. "No." He stepped back, his face hardening into a mask of cold fury. "I reject this. I reject her." The hall fell into stunned silence. "Your Majesty," Elder Thaddeus's voice was urgent, "you cannot reject a true mate bond. The consequences—" "She is just a human!" Cassian's roar echoed through the hall, each word a dagger in Elara's heart. "A servant who's lived among us in deception. Whatever magic created this false bond, I will not accept it. I will not have a weak, powerless human as my queen." He turned to Seraphina, his jaw set. "You will be my queen. This is nothing but a mistake, a cruel joke of fate that I refuse to acknowledge." Elara looked up at him through tears she couldn't stop, her body still racked with the agony of her incomplete transformation. Their eyes met, and she saw the truth there. He meant every word. To him she was nothing, less than nothing, an embarrassment, a stain on his perfect bloodline. The silver mark on her wrist burned like acid, the mate bond screaming in protest at his rejection. Around them the crowd whispered and pointed, their expressions ranging from shock to disgust to cruel amusement. "Remove her from my sight," Cassian commanded, his voice cold as winter death. "Lock her in the dungeons until I decide what to do with her. And someone find out how a dormant Omega has been hiding in my palace for years without detection." Guards moved forward, grabbing Elara's arms. She didn't resist. She couldn't. Her world had just imploded, her secret exposed, her mate, her fated mate, rejecting her before the entire supernatural realm. As they dragged her toward the doors, she heard Seraphina's triumphant laugh, saw the cruel satisfaction in the noble wolf's eyes. She was a spectacle, a cautionary tale, a joke. The last thing she saw before the guards hauled her into the darkness was Cassian turning back to Seraphina, reaching for her throat to complete the marking ceremony as if nothing had happened. As if Elara didn't exist at all. The dungeon doors slammed shut, and in the darkness Elara's wolf finally broke free with a howl of anguish that shook the very foundations of the palace. A sound of heartbreak and rage that promised this was only the beginning. The dungeon cells beneath Silvercrest Palace were carved from the same black granite as the fortress above, but here the stone wept with moisture and ancient despair. Elara had been thrown into the deepest cell, where silver bars reinforced with suppression runes kept supernatural prisoners contained. For 3 days, she'd existed in a fog of pain and confusion as her body warred with itself, human and wolf, two halves that didn't know how to coexist. Her first transformation had been agony. Without guidance, without her mother to explain what was happening, her wolf had torn free in the explosion of instinct and terror. She'd spent hours in her wolf form, a creature of silver-white fur and grey eyes that glowed with inner light, before exhausting herself back into human shape. Now she huddled in the corner, wearing the tattered remains of her servant's dress, her body covered in bruises from thrashing against stone walls. The mate bond mark on her wrist had darkened to angry red, pulsing with pain every time her heart beat. Rejection sickness, she'd heard the guards whisper. When an alpha rejected their true mate, both suffered, but the Omega bore the worst of it. She should have died. Most rejected Omegas did within days, their bodies unable to survive the severing of a bond that was meant to be eternal, but something in her refused to break. On the 4th day, the cell door opened. Elara looked up, expecting guards or perhaps Seraphina come to gloat. Instead, an elderly woman entered, moving with the careful grace of someone who'd lived many lifetimes. She wore robes of deep green, and her silver hair was braided with herbs and crystals. Her eyes were the pale blue of winter ice, ancient and knowing. "Hello, child." Her voice was surprisingly gentle. "I am Morgana Ashwood, and I've come to save your life." Elara's throat was too raw for speech. She'd screamed herself hoarse during her transformations. Morgana knelt beside her, seemingly unbothered by the filth of the dungeon floor. She placed a weathered hand on Elara's forehead, and immediately warmth flooded through her body, easing the worst of the pain. "You're a healer," Elara managed to whisper. "I'm much more than that, dear one. I'm the last of the Moon Witches, guardians of the old magic that predates even the first wolves." She pulled a vial from her robes, filled with liquid that glowed soft silver. "Drink. It will stabilize your wolf and ease the rejection sickness." Elara drank without hesitation. What did she have to lose? The liquid tasted of moonlight and starflowers, cool and sweet. Within moments, the constant agony in her chest dulled to a manageable ache. "Why are you helping me?" Morgana's smile was sad. "Because I knew your mother, Liana Silvermoon. I was there the night she fled the Omega Sanctuary with you in her arms, choosing exile and obscurity over the fate that awaited you both. She made me promise that if her secret was ever discovered, I would protect you." Tears burned Elara's eyes. "She never told me about what I was, about any of this. She was trying to protect you. The Omega bloodline was hunted to extinction because of what you represent. Unlimited potential, the ability to bear heirs of unprecedented power, the capacity to shift the balance of supernatural politics with your very existence." Morgana helped her sit up, supporting her weight. "Your mother suppressed your wolf with ancient magic, hoping you could live a normal life. But true nature cannot be denied forever. The moment King Cassian's blood recognized yours, the spell shattered. He rejected me." The words tasted like ash. In front of everyone, he called me weak, powerless, just a human. "He's a fool." Morgana's voice hardened. "But a fool shaped by centuries of tradition and prejudice. Cassian Nightshade has ruled through strength alone for 50 years. The idea that his fated mate could be someone he perceives as beneath him threatens everything he believes about power and worthiness. So what happens now? Do I just die here? Absolutely not." Morgana stood, her eyes flashing with determination. "I've arranged your escape. There's a sanctuary in the Whispering Woods 3 days' journey north. It's protected by ancient wards, hidden from those who would harm you. There you'll learn to control your wolf, to understand your power, and to become what you were always meant to be." "I don't understand. If I'm so weak, so powerless." "Child." Morgana cupped her face, forcing Elara to meet her eyes. "You are an Omega. Do you know what that truly means? Not the propaganda about breeding and submission, but the truth. Omegas are the rarest wolves because they possess something alphas never can, the ability to unite, to heal, to bring balance. Your power doesn't come from dominance but from connection. You can sense emotions, influence pack bonds, and yes, bear children of extraordinary ability. But more than that, you have the potential to be a leader in ways Cassian's brute strength never could achieve. Hope, fragile and terrifying, flickered in Elara's chest. But I don't know how to be any of those things. Then you'll learn. Morgana pulled her to her feet. The guards will change shifts in 10 minutes. I've left clothes and supplies in the passage beyond the east wall. Follow the silver moths, they'll guide you to safety. Won't you come with me? I must stay. If I disappear the same night you escape, suspicion will fall on me, and I have work yet to do within these walls. She pressed something into Elara's hand, her mother's pendant, the silver warm against her palm. This belonged to the first Omega, passed down through your bloodline for 2,000 years. It will protect you and amplify your natural abilities. Never take it off again. Elara clasped the pendant around her neck, feeling its power settle into her bones like coming home. One more thing, Morgana said as she moved toward the door. At the sanctuary, you'll find others like you, not Omegas, but outcasts, those rejected by the traditional pack structure. And you'll meet someone who will change everything. Trust him, even when it seems impossible. Who? But Morgana was already gone, the cell door standing open, an invitation to freedom or perhaps to a fate more dangerous than imprisonment. Elara didn't hesitate. She slipped through the shadows, following the route Morgana had described. The east wall had a loose stone that swung inward, revealing a narrow passage that smelled of earth and old magic. Inside she found leather pants, a tunic, boots, and a pack filled with supplies. She changed quickly, her new wolf senses making the darkness easy to navigate. As she emerged into the night air, silver moths appeared, their wings glowing with bioluminescence. They danced ahead of her, leading her away from the palace, away from the life she'd known, toward an uncertain future. The Whispering Woods earned their name. As Elara traveled deeper into the ancient forest, she heard voices in the wind. Not words exactly, but emotions, memories, the accumulated consciousness of centuries. The trees here were massive, their trunks wider than houses, their branches forming a canopy so thick that even at midday twilight reigned. Her wolf loved it. The creature inside her, still so new and strange, felt at home among the wild magic. Several times during her journey, Elara shifted without meaning to, her control still fragile, but each transformation came easier, hurt less, felt more natural. On the third night, she found the sanctuary. It appeared suddenly, as if the forest had simply decided to reveal it. A clearing opened before her, and within it stood a compound of buildings that seemed to grow from the earth itself, living wood shaped into homes, connected by bridges and walkways that swayed gently in the breeze. Lights glowed warm in windows, and she could hear laughter, conversation, the sounds of life. At the clearing's edge, a figure waited. He was tall but not massive like Cassian, built lean and graceful like a dancer or a swordsman. His hair was dark auburn, falling to his shoulders in waves, and his eyes were the green of deep forests. He wore simple clothes, leather pants and a loose white shirt, but carried himself with quiet confidence. Most striking were the scars that covered his visible skin, silvery lines that spoke of battles survived and pain endured. "You must be Elara." His voice was warm, tinged with an accent she couldn't place. "Morgana sent word you were coming. I'm Kieran Ashford, and welcome to Thornhaven." Thornhaven? She approached cautiously, her wolf assessing him. Not an alpha, she could sense that immediately. Something else, something that made her instincts calm rather than bristle. A sanctuary for those who don't fit in the traditional pack structure. Omegas who escaped persecution, betas who refused to bow to corrupt alphas, humans who stumbled into the supernatural world and couldn't return, even a few alphas who rejected the brutality of their kind. He smiled, and it transformed his face from handsome to beautiful. "We're a family of misfits, and we've been waiting for you." "Why? I'm nobody. Just a servant who survived rejection sickness that should have killed you, who transformed without guidance and didn't go feral, who walked 3 days through the Whispering Woods, where most wolves lose their minds to the ancient magic, and arrived perfectly sane." Kieran's green eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You're far stronger than you know, Elara Silvermoon, And here you'll discover exactly how powerful an Omega can be. He offered his hand. Not a command, not a demand, an invitation. Elara looked back toward the direction of Silvercrest Palace, where Cassian had chosen Seraphina, where she'd been humiliated and rejected and thrown away like garbage. Then she looked at Kieran's outstretched hand, at the warm lights of Thornhaven, at the possibility of becoming something more than a victim. She took his hand. "Then teach me," she said, her voice steady for the first time since her world had shattered. "Teach me everything." Kieran's smile widened. "It will be my pleasure, but I should warn you, the path ahead won't be easy. Learning to master your Omega abilities, understanding pack dynamics, controlling your wolf, it takes time and dedication. I have nothing but time." Bitterness crept into her voice. "And apparently a mate who wishes I didn't exist." Something flickered in Kieran's expression. Sympathy mixed with something else she couldn't identify. "The mate bond is complicated, especially when rejection is involved. But Elara, you should know something. Cassian didn't complete the bond with Seraphina." Her heart stuttered. "What?" He tried. 3 times over the past 4 days, he's attempted to mark her and make her his queen. Each time his wolf refused. "The bond between you, even rejected, is too strong. He can't claim another while it exists." Hope and fury warred in her chest. "So I'm trapped, forever bound to someone who hates what I am." "Not trapped. The bond can be broken, but it requires both parties to truly let go, or—" He hesitated. "Or what?" "Or one of you must become powerful enough to sever it by force, which is why your training begins tomorrow. Because whether you choose to break the bond or claim what's rightfully yours, you'll need strength that goes beyond anything Cassian Nightshade can imagine." As Kieran led her into Thornhaven, introducing her to the others, a fierce beta warrior named Isla, a gentle human healer called Thomas, a young alpha named Rowan, who'd fled his abusive pack, Elara felt something shift inside her. She'd been rejected, humiliated, cast aside, but she wasn't broken. And when she finally faced Cassian Nightshade again, he would see not a weak human servant, but an Omega Queen, who'd claimed her power and refused to be diminished. The moon rose full and bright above Thornhaven, and for the first time since her world had shattered, Elara Silvermoon smiled. 6 months transformed everything. Elara stood at the edge of Thornhaven's training grounds, her silver-white wolf form magnificent in the dawn light. She was larger than most female wolves, her Omega nature giving her a presence that commanded attention without aggression. Her fur gleamed like moonlight on water, and her grey eyes held a wisdom that hadn't existed half a year ago. Under Kieran's patient guidance, she'd learned to shift at will, to embrace her wolf rather than fear it. But more importantly, she discovered her Omega abilities, the power to sense emotions like colors in the air, to soothe aggression with her presence, to strengthen pack bonds with nothing more than intention and will. She'd also learned to fight. Isla, the beta warrior with scars crossing her dark skin and fire in her amber eyes, had been merciless in combat training. "Omegas were hunted because people feared your power," she'd said during their first session, "but they also assumed you'd be easy prey. Prove them wrong." Now Elara could hold her own against most of Thornhaven's fighters. She was fast, agile, and had learned to use her smaller size as an advantage. More than that, she'd learned to weaponize her Omega abilities, projecting fear into opponents, disrupting their focus, even temporarily severing the connection between wolf and human consciousness. "You're ready," Kieran said, approaching in his human form. Over the months they'd grown close, not romantically but with a deep friendship built on mutual respect and understanding. He'd been patient when she'd woken screaming from nightmares of rejection, firm when she'd wanted to give up, and honest when she'd needed hard truths. Elara shifted back to human form, the transformation now as natural as breathing. She wore leather fighting gear that Isla had made for her, practical but elegant, dyed deep forest green with silver accents. Her hair had grown longer, falling in waves past her shoulders, and her body had changed too, stronger, more confident, moving with the grace of someone who knew exactly what she was capable of. "Ready for what?" she asked, though she suspected she knew. "The autumn gathering. Every pack in the realm sends representatives to the capital for 3 days of politics, trade negotiations, and displays of power. It's the perfect opportunity for you to re-enter society, not as a servant, but as the Omega Queen you were always meant to be." Her heart raced. "Cassian will be there." "Of course." It's his event, his chance to solidify alliances and demonstrate his power. Serafina will be at his side, still trying to convince the realm she's his chosen queen, despite the fact that he can't actually mark her. Kieran's green eyes were serious. This won't be easy, Elara. You'll face wolves who witnessed your humiliation, who believe you're weak, who think you have no right to exist, but you'll also have the chance to show them exactly how wrong they are. And if I'm not ready? If I fail? Then you fail. But I don't think you will. He smiled. The girl who was thrown in the dungeons 6 months ago might have failed. But the woman standing before me? She's going to set their world on fire. The autumn gathering transformed Silvercrest Palace into a glittering showcase of supernatural power. Hundreds of wolves from across the realm filled the grounds, alphas displaying their strength, betas negotiating alliances, warriors competing in tournaments, merchants hawking magical wares. Elara arrived with Kieran and a small delegation from Thornhaven. She wore a gown that Isla had designed specifically for this moment. Midnight blue silk that flowed like water, with silver embroidery forming patterns of wolves and moons. Her mother's pendant rested at her throat, and her hair was styled in an intricate braid woven with silver chains. She looked every inch a queen, powerful and untouchable. The moment she entered the palace grounds, heads turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through grass. Is that the servant girl? I heard she died from rejection sickness. She's an Omega, a real Omega. Impossible. Look at her. She's magnificent. Elara kept her head high, her Omega senses reading the emotions swirling around her. Shock, curiosity, fear, desire, hatred. She filtered through them with the control Kieran had taught her, letting nothing show on her face. They made their way to the great hall, where the evening's formal reception was being held. This was the heart of pack politics, where alliances were forged and enemies identified. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow light across marble floors, and tables groaned under the weight of elaborate feasts. At the far end of the hall, on a raised dais, sat the throne, and on that throne sat Cassian Nightshade. He looked exactly as she remembered, massive, powerful, devastatingly handsome, in formal black attire that emphasized his warrior's build. His golden eyes surveyed the room with the confidence of someone who'd never been challenged. Serafina stood at his right hand, resplendent in crimson silk, her hand possessively on his shoulder. The moment Cassian's gaze found Elara across the crowded hall, the world stopped. His entire body went rigid. His nostrils flared, catching her scent even across the distance. And it was different now, no longer the subdued scent of a dormant Omega, but the full, intoxicating fragrance of a mature wolf in her prime. Moonflowers and winter rain, and something wild that called to the deepest part of his alpha nature. The mate bond, dormant for months, roared to life with painful intensity. Elara felt it like a physical blow, the pull toward him, the desperate need to close the distance, the bond screaming that he was hers and she was his, and they belonged together. But she'd learned to master pain. She stood perfectly still, meeting his gaze with cool indifference, letting him see exactly what he'd thrown away. Serafina noticed his reaction, her violet eyes narrowing with fury. She leaned close, whispering something urgent in his ear. Cassian's jaw clenched, but he didn't look away from Elara. Breathe, Kieran murmured beside her. You're doing perfectly. The crowd had noticed the tension, conversations dying as everyone watched the silent confrontation between the rejected Omega and the Alpha King who'd cast her aside. Elder Thaddeus, ever the diplomat, stepped forward. Lady Elara Silvermoon of Thornhaven, you honor us with your presence. It has been some time since we last saw you. Indeed, Elder. Her voice was steady, carrying clearly through the silent hall. I've been occupied with my education, learning what it truly means to be an Omega, understanding the power my bloodline carries, discovering that strength comes in many forms, not all of them brute force. The barb hit its mark. Cassian's eyes flashed gold, his wolf rising to the surface. You dare! Serafina began, but Cassian raised a hand, silencing her. Lady Elara, his voice was rough, strained. I was told you died. Rejection sickness. I'm sure you were devastated, she replied, her tone suggesting she believed nothing of the sort. But as you can see, I'm quite alive. Thriving, actually. It turns out that being rejected by someone who valued pride over destiny was the best thing that ever happened to me. Gasps rippled through the crowd. No one spoke to the Alpha King like that. No one. Cassian rose from his throne, descending the dais with predatory grace. The crowd parted before him like water, everyone desperate to avoid being caught in whatever was about to happen. He stopped 10 feet from Elara, close enough that she could feel the heat of his presence, far enough that it wasn't a direct challenge. "You've changed," he said, and there was something in his voice she couldn't identify. Regret, anger, longing. "I've grown. There's a difference." She tilted her head, studying him with her Omega senses fully engaged. What she felt from him shocked her, a roiling mass of confusion, desire, fury, and something that felt almost like grief. The mate bond was tearing him apart, just as it had nearly destroyed her. But where she'd learned to master the pain, he was drowning in it. "Your Majesty!" Kieran stepped forward smoothly, placing himself slightly between them. "Perhaps this conversation would be better held in private. The gathering is meant for celebration, not personal conflicts." Cassian's eyes snapped to Kieran, and his expression darkened with pure alpha rage. "And who are you to speak in the presence of your king?" "Kieran Ashford, Alpha of Thornhaven, though I prefer to think of myself as Elara's friend and mentor rather than her alpha. We don't believe in the traditional hierarchy at our sanctuary." His smile was pleasant, but his stance was that of a warrior ready for battle. "We believe in mutual respect, earned loyalty, and the radical idea that power should be used to protect rather than dominate." Thornhaven. Seraphina's voice dripped with contempt. That pathetic collection of outcasts and weaklings. How fitting that she'd end up there. "Careful, Lady Seraphina." Elara's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Those outcasts and weaklings have taught me more about true strength in 6 months than you've learned in your entire pampered life. They've shown me that being cast aside by small-minded fools isn't a curse. It's liberation." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Elara's Omega power radiated outward, not aggressive but undeniable. A presence that made every wolf in the hall feel the weight of her words, the truth of her conviction. "Enough!" Cassian's command cracked like a whip. "This is neither the time nor place for this discussion. Lady Elara, you will attend me in the private council chamber, now." "No." The single word fell like a stone into still water. Cassian stared at her as if she'd grown a second head. "What did you say?" "I said no, Your Majesty. I'm not your subject, not your servant, and certainly not your mate, since you rejected that bond so publicly and thoroughly. You have no authority over me." She smiled, and it was sharp as broken glass. "If you wish to speak with me, you may request an audience like anyone else. I'll consider it based on my schedule and inclination." For a moment, she thought he might actually attack her. His wolf was so close to the surface that his eyes glowed pure gold, his claws extending. The alpha dominance rolling off him would have brought any other wolf to their knees. But Elara was an Omega, and Omega power didn't bow to alpha rage. She stood perfectly still, meeting his fury with calm strength, and slowly, so slowly, she felt his wolf retreat, unable to dominate what it recognized as its equal. "This isn't over," Cassian said, his voice barely controlled. "No," Elara agreed. "It's not. But when we do speak, it will be as equals, or not at all." She turned her back on him, the ultimate insult to an alpha, and walked away, Kieran at her side. The crowd parted before her, and she could feel their shock, their awe, their fear. Behind her, she heard Seraphina's frantic whispers, trying to soothe Cassian's rage. But she also felt something else through the mate bond, something that made her steps falter for just a moment. Respect, desire, and the first crack in the wall he'd built around his heart. The autumn gathering had only just begun, and Elara Silvermoon had just declared war on the Alpha King who'd thrown her away. Let him try to ignore her now. The autumn gathering stretched across 3 days, and by the second evening, the entire supernatural realm buzzed with gossip about the Omega who'd defied the Alpha King. Elara had become the center of attention. Wolves sought her out for conversation. Alphas from distant packs requested introductions, and even the most traditional nobles couldn't hide their curiosity. She handled it all with grace that surprised even herself. 6 months ago, she would have wilted under such scrutiny. Now she moved through the political landscape like someone born to it, using her Omega abilities to read intentions, forge connections, and subtly influence those around her. But it was exhausting. On the 3rd morning, she slipped away from the palace grounds, seeking solitude in the gardens where she'd once worked as a nameless servant. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of dying leaves and approaching winter. She found a secluded bench beneath an ancient oak, finally allowing herself to breathe. "I thought I might find you here." Elara's entire body tensed. She knew that voice, had heard it in her dreams and nightmares for 6 months. Slowly, she turned to find Cassian standing at the garden's entrance, alone for the first time since she'd arrived. He looked different somehow, tired. The arrogant confidence that usually surrounded him like armor seemed diminished, and there were shadows under his golden eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. "Your Majesty." She didn't rise, didn't bow. "I don't recall granting you an audience." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "This is my palace, my gardens. Then I'll leave." She stood, preparing to walk past him. "Wait." The word came out rough, almost desperate. "Please." The please stopped her. In all the time she'd known of Cassian Nightshade, even from a distance as a servant, she'd never heard him say that word to anyone. "What do you want?" She kept her voice neutral, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "To talk. Truly talk. Without an audience, without politics." He moved closer, and she caught his scent, pine and smoke, and something uniquely him that made her wolf whine with longing. "You were right. If we're to speak, it should be as equals. We're not equals. You're a king, and I'm my mate." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. "My true mate. Whether I accepted it or not. The bond hasn't faded, Elara. If anything, it's grown stronger. Every day, every hour, I feel you. Your emotions, your presence, it's driving me insane." "Good." The word came out sharper than she intended. "You deserve to suffer a fraction of what you put me through." He flinched as if she'd struck him. I know what I did was unforgivable. Standing before the entire realm and rejecting you, calling you weak, having you thrown in the dungeons like a criminal." His hands clenched into fists. "I've replayed that night 1,000 times, and each time I hate myself more for it." "Then why?" The question burst from her, 6 months of pain and confusion pouring out. "Why reject me? The bond was real, undeniable. You felt it as clearly as I did." Cassian was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw with emotion she'd never heard from him. "Because I was terrified." She stared at him, shocked, terrified. "You're the Alpha King. You've ruled for 50 years, survived countless challenges, led armies, and in all that time I've never been vulnerable, never had a weakness that enemies could exploit." He turned to face her fully, and the anguish in his golden eyes was real. "Do you know what it's like to be a king, Elara? Every decision scrutinized, every moment of weakness seized upon, every relationship evaluated for political advantage. I've had lovers, but never a mate, never someone who could truly destroy me. So, you destroyed me instead." "Yes." The admission was barely a whisper. "When that bond snapped into place, when I realized my fated mate was someone I'd perceived as powerless, as beneath my station, I panicked. All I could think was that my enemies would use you against me, that you'd be a target, that I'd be seen as weak for accepting a mate who couldn't defend herself. So, you chose pride over destiny, power over love. I chose wrong." He took another step closer, and she could see the desperation in his face. "I know that now. Watching you these past 2 days, the strength you've gained, the power you command, the way even the most traditional alphas respect you, I've realized what a fool I was. You were never weak, Elara. I was just too blind and arrogant to see your true nature. Despite everything, despite the pain and humiliation and months of suffering, Elara felt something shift in her chest. The mate bond pulsed with warmth, urging her to forgive, to accept, to close the distance between them. But she'd learned to be stronger than her instincts. "Pretty words, Your Majesty. But words are easy. Actions define us, and your actions told me exactly what you thought of me." She met his gaze steadily. "You didn't just reject the bond. You rejected me as a person, dismissed my worth, had me imprisoned. You chose Seraphina, someone who spent months trying to convince the realm she's your queen, despite the fact that you can't mark her. I know, and I've been trying to fix it, to find a way to undo the damage. You can't undo it." Her voice rose, months of suppressed anger finally breaking free. "Do you have any idea what rejection sickness feels like? It's like dying slowly. Every cell in your body screaming that something essential has been torn away. I survived because I'm stronger than you gave me credit for, because I had people who believed in me when you didn't. But I'll carry those scars forever. Then let me earn your forgiveness." He dropped to one knee before her, and the sight of the proud Alpha King kneeling was so shocking that her breath caught. "I can't change the past, but I can dedicate my future to proving I'm worthy of you. Give me a chance, Elara. Let me court you properly. Show you that I see you now, truly see you. And Serafina? I've already told her the truth, that I can never mark her, never truly make her my queen because my wolf recognizes only one mate." His jaw tightened. "She didn't take it well. She's demanded I find a way to break our bond so I can choose her instead." "Can you? Break it, I mean." "Theoretically, yes. There are ancient rituals, dark magic that can sever even a true mate bond. But it would require both of us to willingly participate, to truly want the bond destroyed." His golden eyes searched hers. "Is that what you want? To be free of me forever?" Elara's hand moved unconsciously to her wrist, where the mate mark still pulsed beneath her skin. 6 months ago, she would have said yes without hesitation. She would have done anything to escape the pain of rejection. But now, "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me wants nothing more than to sever this bond and never think of you again, to build a life at Thornhaven, to use my abilities to help others, to be free of the politics and pain that come with being connected to you." "And the other part?" "The other part remembers that you're my fated mate, that the moon goddess herself chose us for each other, and there must be a reason. That despite everything you've done, the bond still calls to me, still makes me want—" She trailed off, unable to finish. Cassian rose slowly, moving closer, until only inches separated them. "Want what?" "This." She closed the distance, pressing her lips to his. The kiss was electric, 6 months of longing and pain and desire exploding between them. The mate bond sang with joy, flooding them both with warmth and rightness. Cassian's arms came around her, pulling her close, and for a moment nothing else existed. Not the past, not the pain, just this perfect connection. Then reality crashed back, and Elara pulled away, her chest heaving. "That's what makes this so hard," she whispered. "The bond makes me want you, makes me crave your touch, your presence. But my mind remembers every moment of humiliation, every second of agony. How do I reconcile those two things?" "I don't know." His voice was rough. "But I'm willing to spend however long it takes to help you find the answer. No pressure, no demands. Just give me a chance to prove I've changed, that I can be the mate you deserve." Before Elara could respond, footsteps echoed through the garden. They sprang apart as Serafina appeared, her violet eyes blazing with fury. "How touching," she spat. "The mighty Alpha King, groveling before a servant girl." "Serafina," Cassian began, but she cut him off. "No. I've been patient, understanding, supportive while you've wallowed in this pathetic obsession. But I'm done." She turned her venomous gaze on Elara. "You think you've won? That because you've learned to dress nicely and speak confidently, you're suddenly worthy of being queen? You're still the same worthless human who scrubbed floors and emptied chamber pots. And you're still the same insecure she-wolf who needs a crown to feel valuable," Elara replied calmly. "The difference is I've grown beyond my past. You're still trapped in yours." Serafina's claws extended. "You little—" "Enough!" Cassian's alpha command rolled through the garden with physical force. "Serafina, you will not threaten my mate." "Your mate?" Serafina laughed bitterly. "You rejected her, Cassian. Before the entire realm, you called her weak and worthless. You can't just take that back because she's learned to play dress-up." I was wrong. The admission seemed to cost him. "About everything. And I intend to spend the rest of my life making it right." "Then you're a fool." Serafina's expression twisted with hurt and rage. "I've stood by you for months, helped you rule, supported your decisions. I would have been a perfect queen, strong, connected from the right bloodline. But you'd throw all that away for a dormant Omega who hid what she was?" "She didn't hide. She didn't even know," Cassian said quietly. "And yes, I would choose her over anyone, because she's my true mate, and I was an idiot to ever deny it." Serafina stared at him for a long moment, something breaking in her eyes. Then she turned and fled, her footsteps echoing away into silence. Elara felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. Whatever Serafina's faults, she genuinely cared for Cassian, had believed she would be his queen. Now that dream was shattered. "I should go," Elara said softly. "This is too much, too fast." "I understand." Cassian didn't try to stop her. "But Elara, before you leave, will you at least consider what I've said? Consider giving us a chance. She looked at him, this powerful Alpha King who'd destroyed her and was now begging for forgiveness. The mate bond urged her to say yes, to forgive everything and fall into his arms. But she'd learned to be more than her instincts. "I'll consider it," she said finally. "But Cassian, if we do this, if I give you a chance, it won't be as your subject or your possession. It will be as your equal partner. I won't be a queen who stands silently at your side. I'll challenge you, push you, demand that you be better." A slow smile spread across his face, the first genuine one she'd seen from him. "I wouldn't want it any other way." As Elara walked away, she felt the weight of the decision before her. She could sever the bond, return to Thornhaven, build a life free from the complications of being the Alpha King's mate. Or she could take a chance on the male who'd hurt her, trust that he'd truly changed, and claim her place as Omega Queen. Neither path was easy, neither was safe. But for the first time since that terrible night 6 months ago, Elara felt like the choice was truly hers, and that made all the difference. 8 months later, the council chamber of Silvercrest Palace had never seen anything like it. Where once only alphas and high-ranking betas had gathered to make decisions that affected the entire realm, now the room held a diverse assembly that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Omegas, lower-ranking wolves, even humans with supernatural knowledge sat at the table as equals, and at the head of that table, beside the Alpha King, sat Elara Silvermoon Nightshade, Omega Queen of the Silvercrest Kingdom. She wore a gown of silver and midnight blue, her mother's pendant at her throat, and a crown of moonstone and diamonds resting on her braided hair. But it wasn't the finery that commanded respect. It was the quiet power that radiated from her, the confidence of someone who'd earned every inch of her position through strength, wisdom, and unwavering determination. "The proposal from the Northern Pax is reasonable," she said, reviewing the documents before her. "They're asking for aid in rebuilding after the avalanche, not demanding tribute. I recommend we send supplies and healers, along with engineers to help reinforce their structures against future disasters." Alpha Theron of the Northern Pax, a grizzled wolf who'd initially opposed Elara's ascension, nodded with genuine respect. "Your Majesty is most generous. The North remembers its friends." Cassian watched her with barely concealed pride and something deeper, a love that had grown from the ashes of their disastrous beginning into something real and unshakable. The past 8 months had been a journey for them both. After the autumn gathering, Elara had returned to Thornhaven, making Cassian work for every moment of her time. He'd courted her properly, visiting the sanctuary, participating in their community, learning to see strength in forms beyond physical dominance. He'd trained alongside Thornhaven's warriors, shared meals with outcasts he'd once dismissed, and slowly, painfully, unlearned centuries of prejudice. It hadn't been easy. They'd fought, spectacular arguments that shook the palace walls, about tradition, about power, about what it meant to rule. But they'd also learned to listen, to compromise, to build something new together. 3 months ago, Cassian had asked her again to be his queen. Not commanded, not assumed, but asked, on his knees in Thornhaven's central square, before all the outcasts and misfits who'd become her family. This time, she'd said yes. The marking ceremony had been different from traditional bondings. Elara had insisted on changes, both of them marking each other as equals. The ceremony held at Thornhaven rather than the palace, with representatives from every level of society present. When Cassian's fangs had finally pierced her skin and his venom had mixed with her blood, completing the bond that had been rejected and denied for so long, the power that had exploded between them had been visible. Silver and gold light intertwining, sealing them together for eternity. Now, as Omega Queen, Elara was reshaping the realm in ways no one had anticipated. "Next item," Kieran said from his seat at the table. He'd accepted a position as royal advisor, bringing Thornhaven's progressive ideals into the heart of traditional pack politics. The petition from the Omega Sanctuary Network. Elara smiled. This was her greatest achievement, a network of safe havens across the realm where Omegas could live without fear, learn to control their abilities, and choose their own paths. In 8 months, they'd discovered 17 Omegas who'd been hiding, suppressing their nature out of terror. Now they thrived, and the realm was beginning to understand what had been lost when Omegas were hunted to extinction. The network requests funding for 3 new sanctuaries and protection details for Omegas traveling between locations, she explained. I'm recommending full approval and assigning royal guards to ensure their safety. Approved, Cassian said immediately. He'd learned that Omega welfare was non-negotiable for his queen, and honestly, he'd come to see the wisdom in it. The Omegas who joined society brought gifts the realm had forgotten: healing abilities, emotional intelligence, the capacity to unite fractured packs. They made the kingdom stronger, not weaker. Elder Thaddeus cleared his throat. If I may, your majesties, there's one more matter. Lady Seraphina has requested an audience. The room fell silent. Seraphina had left the palace the day after the autumn gathering, retreating to her family's estate. Rumors suggested she'd been working with dark magic, trying to find ways to break mate bonds or force new ones into existence. Let her in, Elara said calmly, though Cassian felt her tension through their bond. Seraphina entered, and the change in her was startling. She looked thinner, harder, with shadows under her violet eyes that spoke of obsession and sleepless nights. But there was also something else. A resignation, a weariness that suggested she'd finally reached the end of a long, painful road. Your Majesties. She bowed, the gesture stiff but genuine. I've come to apologize and to ask for your mercy. Cassian's eyes narrowed. Explain. I've spent 8 months trying to undo what the moon goddess herself decreed. I've consulted with dark witches, studied forbidden magic, even attempted rituals that nearly killed me, all to break your bond or force you to choose me instead. Her voice cracked. But I've finally accepted the truth. You were never meant to be mine, Cassian, and Elara, you were always meant to be queen. Elara studied her with Omega senses fully engaged, reading the emotions beneath the words. Seraphina was telling the truth. She genuinely let go, finally accepting defeat. What do you want from us? Elara asked, not unkindly. Permission to leave the realm, to travel to the Eastern Territories and start over, away from the constant reminder of what I lost. Seraphina's pride was still evident, but it was tempered now with hard-won wisdom. And perhaps in forgiveness, though I know I don't deserve it. Elara exchanged a glance with Cassian, their bond allowing silent communication. He would support whatever she decided. You tried to have me killed, Elara said bluntly. Twice. Once in the dungeons and again during my journey to Thornhaven. Did you think I didn't know? Seraphina's face paled. Yes, I did. And I will carry that shame for the rest of my life. I was consumed by jealousy and ambition, and I became a monster. Yes, you did. Elara rose, moving around the table to stand before Seraphina. But I've learned that holding on to hatred only poisons the one who carries it. You're not the villain of my story, Seraphina. You're just someone who loved the wrong person and made terrible choices because of it. She placed a hand on Seraphina's shoulder, and her Omega power flowed out, not to harm, but to heal. Seraphina gasped as months of obsessive pain and self-hatred began to ease, replaced by something like peace. You have my permission to leave, Elara said softly, and my forgiveness, for what it's worth. Go to the Eastern Territories, find yourself again, and maybe someday find someone who's actually meant to be yours. Tears streamed down Seraphina's face. Thank you, she whispered. Your Majesty, you're a better queen than I ever could have been. After Seraphina left, the council meeting concluded, and Elara found herself alone with Cassian in their private chambers. These rooms had been redesigned to reflect both of them, his strength and her grace, his tradition and her innovation, creating a space that felt like home. Cassian pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. You continue to amaze me, he murmured, showing mercy to someone who tried to kill you. She was broken, and I had the power to help her heal. What kind of queen would I be if I chose vengeance over compassion? Elara tilted her head back to look at him. Besides, I learned from the best. A certain alpha king who swallowed his pride, admitted his mistakes, and spent months proving he could change. I had excellent motivation. He kissed her softly, the mate bond singing between them, the most incredible Omega in existence. Flatterer. But she smiled, her heart full. A knock at the door interrupted them. Kieran entered, his expression excited. You need to see this. He led them to the balcony overlooking the palace grounds. Below, hundreds of wolves had gathered, not for a ceremony or celebration, but simply to be together. Alphas and Omegas, betas and humans, wolves from every pack and station, all coexisting peacefully in a way that would have been impossible a year ago. "This is what you've built," Kieran said to Elara. "A realm where strength is measured not by dominance but by character, where omegas are celebrated, not hunted, where even a servant girl can become queen if she has the courage to claim her power." Elara watched the scene below, thinking of the terrified girl who'd scrubbed floors and hidden her true nature. That girl was gone, transformed by pain and perseverance into someone who could stand beside a king and reshape a kingdom. "Do you ever regret it?" Cassian asked quietly. "The pain you endured, the humiliation, the months of suffering." She considered the question seriously. "I regret that it had to happen that way. But if it hadn't, if you'd accepted me that first night, I would have been a weak queen, dependent on you, unsure of my own worth. The rejection forced me to find my strength, to discover who I was beyond the mate bond. In a strange way, it was the greatest gift you could have given me. I'm not sure I deserve credit for accidentally making you stronger by being an arrogant fool." "No," she agreed with a laugh. "But you deserve credit for recognizing your mistake and doing the hard work to fix it. That takes a different kind of strength." As the sun set over Silvercrest, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Elara felt a flutter in her abdomen, the first stirrings of the life growing within her. She'd discovered her pregnancy just days ago, and they hadn't yet announced it to the realm. A child born of a true mate, bond between an alpha king and an omega queen. The prophecies spoke of such children, wolves of unprecedented power who could unite the supernatural world or tear it apart. But Elara wasn't afraid. She and Cassian would raise their child to understand that true power came from compassion, that strength meant protecting the vulnerable, that being royal meant serving rather than ruling. "What are you thinking?" Cassian asked, sensing her emotions through their bond. "That a year ago, I was just a servant who thought she was human. Now I'm a queen, a mate, and soon to be a mother." She placed his hand on her still flat stomach, watching his eyes widen as he realized what she was telling him. "And I'm thinking that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to exactly where we're meant to be." Cassian dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead against her abdomen with a reverence that made her heart ache. "I will spend every day of my life being worthy of you," he vowed. "Both of you." "I know," Elara said softly, running her fingers through his hair. "You already are." As night fell over the kingdom, Elara Silvermoon Nightshade stood on her balcony, her mate at her side, and their child growing within her, and knew with absolute certainty that she'd found her place in the world. Not because an alpha king had chosen her, but because she'd chosen herself, claimed her power, embraced her nature, and refused to let anyone else define her worth. She'd been rejected, humiliated, cast aside, and she'd risen from those ashes to become a queen who would change the supernatural world forever. The moon rose full and bright above Silvercrest Palace, and in its silver light Elara smiled. She had flourished exactly where she was planted, and her story was only beginning. Thank you for joining us on Elara's journey from servant to queen. If you enjoyed this tale of rejection, redemption, and the power of claiming your own destiny, please subscribe to our channel for more paranormal romance stories. Leave a comment telling us where you're listening from. We love hearing from our global audience. And share this story with anyone who needs a reminder that being cast aside by those who don't see your worth is often the first step toward discovering your true power. Until next time, may you all find the strength to flourish wherever you're planted.